All right. Hi, all, and thank you all for joining. This is the May meeting of the Planning, Zoning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee meeting for ANC 3C. This meeting is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. So there is that. We have two items on the agenda this evening. The first of which is the Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines presentation by the Office of Planning, and then an opportunity for the community to ask committee members and the community members to ask questions on that. And the second item is discussion on the future of the Cleveland Park service lane. I'm, by the way, Janelle Pagets. I'm the commissioner from 3C and one of the co-chairs of this committee, along with Commissioner Tammy Gordon.
Hi.
And then we also have members of the community that are official committee members of this committee, and a reminder to encourage folks to sign up to formally become a committee member of one of our, do we have 5 or 6 committees now?
I think 5.
5?
I'll put the link in the chat.
Great, thank you. We are always hoping, for more community members to join with all of the commissioners who are de facto members of all of these committees. So with that, I will turn this over to Heba from the Office of Planning, who will briefly, introduce what's going on with the Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Good evening, everyone. Heba El-Gawish, Community Planner with the DC Office of Planning and Project Manager for the Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines Project. I'll give a brief overview about the project, the draft release of the document. Can you all hear me okay? Okay.
We can hear you.
The draft release and just an overview of the different components of the document, what the guidelines are intended to achieve, and how the intended use of the guidelines as well. So let's see if I can share my screen.
You can see it.
Okay, good.
Great.
So yeah, as probably a lot of you know by now, the draft Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines document has been released for public review and comment on Friday, April 21st, and the public comment period will run through Friday, May 26th. Following the public comment or during that period, we will also be submitting the draft development guidelines for the Historic Preservation Review Board's consideration at their May public hearing on Thursday, May 25th. And this slide includes links to both the project website where you can view and download the document, as well as submit comments online, and also a link to the HPRB website on the planning.dc.gov to find more details on that process and how you can sign up to testify if you wish to do so. So just as an overview, the Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines sets a framework for integrating mixed-use development into the Woodley Park and Cleveland Park historic districts. This framework supports the need for housing at various income levels and household sizes while sustaining a thriving commercial corridor and enhancing the public realm for residents and visitors. So with the future land uses established in the comprehensive plan, these guidelines take an urban design approach to demonstrate how increased building heights and densities could be implemented in the commercial areas around the Cleveland Park and Woodley Park metro stations. And this project is part of a broader Rock Creek West Corridors planning initiative to advance the district's affordable housing production goals. And there's a parallel effort along Wisconsin Avenue that is focused on the Friendship Heights and Tunleytown metro station areas as well. So these guidelines are intended to be used by private property owners, developers, design professionals, district agencies, and community groups when developing or reviewing proposals for development projects or public space improvements along that segment of the corridor between Porter Street to the north and Calvert Street to the south. Specifically, these guidelines are intended to be used by the Historic Preservation Review Board in their review of development proposals within the Cleveland Park and Woodley Park Historic Districts, the Zoning Commission and its evaluation of planned unit developments or change in zoning for the area, the Office of Planning in its preparation of reports for HPRB or Zoning Commission action. They can also be used by the Public Space Committee in their review of temporary and permanent uses of public spaces, the Advisory Neighborhood Commission and other community groups in reviewing development applications, the Cleveland Park and Woodley Park main streets in considering grants or other programs aimed at improving building facades and commercial sidewalks. And finally, by district and federal agencies considering public investments and planning to accommodate projected growth along the corridor. The draft document is organized into 3 chapters, and it opens up with an executive summary that outlines the purpose of the development guidelines and how they were produced, an introduction chapter that starts with background on the evolution of this segment of the corridor, applicability of the guidelines to future development and ways in which their implementation can advance housing equity goals and ROC requests. The building design guidelines outlined in chapter 2 describes how compatibility of new development can be achieved within the historic district through design strategies that address building massing and height transitions, facade modulation, street wall design and activation, building projections, and building materials and articulation. Chapter 3 of the document is oriented around public realm strategy that promotes an inclusive and safe public realm for residents and visitors of all ages and socioeconomic backgrounds and abilities. The streetscape design guidelines in that chapter create functional and enjoyable sidewalks that support area businesses and destinations along the corridors through elements such as lighting, signage, planting, furnishings, and public art. And then finally, a supplemental appendix that outlines the background around the plan development and process, including the ways in which a racial equity lens was applied to background research and analysis, the community engagement approach, the disaggregation of data by race, and the underscoring of equity policies through an urban design framework, and a section that describes the current conditions of the building and streetscape character along the corridor, which have been provided for context and documentation of architectural styles and streetscape characteristics. So in terms of the purpose and the goals this document is aiming to achieve, Cleveland Park and Woodley Park are home to a mix of architectural styles that have earned these areas listing in the National Register of Historic Places. So the guidelines really provide a blueprint for adapting the built environment in these historic districts to guide growth and change alongside preservation. And using this guidance in development and zoning applications will lead to greater equitable outcomes in the distribution of affordable housing, particularly in Ward 3, and a socioeconomically diverse population that is reflective of the district's demographic makeup. As is described in the 2019 Housing Equity Report and the 2021 ROC Request Roadmap, achieving affordable housing goals in ROC Request requires leveraging the district's financing tools, land use regulations, and opportunity sites. And in Cleveland Park and Woodley Park, this means contributing a greater number of set-aside affordable housing units through zoning map amendments subject to inclusionary zoning plus, or otherwise known as IZ plus, and plan unit developments, also known as PUDs. The graphic on this slide illustrates how IZ plus can get triggered for a development project. So for example, if a property with a zone that allows a building with a floor area ratio or the ratio of a total building square footage to the land area of 2 or 3 FAR, and it requires a 10% affordable set aside under an existing zone. And if this property were to get rezoned to allow a density of 4 or 6 FAR as described in this document, then the set aside for affordable housing through inclusionary zoning plus could increase to up to 20% set aside. So the Office of Planning's focus on development regulations and enabling a public realm that can accommodate more equitable growth is occurring in tandem with other partner agencies that are focused on housing finance tools such as the high needs area tax abatement, and housing production trust fund targeting qualified affordable housing projects in Rock Request. And these regulatory regulations, along with additional financial subsidies and others, are particularly important in achieving affordable units that serve a variety of household sizes and deeper affordability levels. In terms of the process, so far, the draft development guidelines were produced through a robust year-long community engagement process. To achieve inclusive and meaningful engagement outcomes, the project team organized a range of in-person and online activities that were both open to the broad public as well as targeted to specific groups. And in order to ensure representation across a broad sector of community and the district, opportunities to participate online, focus group conversations with targeted stakeholders, pop-ups at neighborhood events, and door-to-door discussions with local business owners offered a variety of ways to engage and created safe spaces to participate in the process. At each of these events, there were clear opportunities for public feedback that have informed these development guidelines. And a record of all the outputs shared and key feedback received has been posted on the project website under the past events tab for the duration of the planning process. And in addition to these activities, the planning process included multiple check-ins with this ANC, ANC 3C, the Historic Preservation Review Board, as well as local civic groups. So in terms of some of the feedback we've heard, especially following during the community design conversations, both in person and the online survey, there were a number of overarching themes that were starting to kind of come forward from the comments that we've received and the feedback we've received that have informed both the building design guidelines and the streetscape design guidelines, especially around kind of this idea of creating a cohesion, but not uniformity between new development and existing historic buildings, maintaining the historical identity along with modernization, creating better pedestrian safety and accessibility, increasing walkability and bikeability along the corridor, increasing affordability and housing opportunities to create more diversity in the area, as well as supporting local small businesses and really advancing a variety of retail options along the corridor, using creative design, building design so that building heights do not overwhelm the streetscape, and also looking at opportunities for public gathering spaces for all ages and abilities. And the detailed record of the community comments and feedback that were received during those community design conversations can be found on the project website, again, under the past tabs page. And then during this public comment period over the next few weeks, we'll be participating in a number of engagement activities. The Woodley Park Community Association is hosting a meeting on Thursday, May 4th at 6:30 p.m. And it's going to be on Zoom. The Cleveland Park Community Association will also be hosting a meeting. We're working through confirming the date and timing of that, and it's anticipated to be in person. The Friendship Heights Alliance is holding their annual Makers Market event on Saturday, May 20th, and the Office of Planning will be there between 3 and 5 p.m. And the event is located on Wisconsin Avenue between Garrison Street and Jennifer Street. And then again, the Office of Planning will be presenting at HPRB's May hearing on the 25th. And then following the public comment period, the Office of Planning will be making any necessary revisions and releasing a final document around the end of the spring, early summer 2023. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Would you like me to stop sharing my screen?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. That was super informative and very helpful. So with that, we'll open it up to commissioners and committee members. Swale?
Thank you. Yes, great presentation. First request, is it okay if we get these slides from you and post on our website?
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. So my question is, Heba, and again, thank you, is let's say one of the things that which our ANC really cares about is creating more housing and more affordable housing. Let's say one of our responses was the opportunity to create more housing and specifically more affordable housing for different variety of levels. What kind of response would help with those things? Like, what kind of response would you like to see, like at this stage, right? So we can say like, oh, we would like to see more affordable housing, we'd like to see more housing, but what is there specifics that we can give that can help you within this round of feedback to advocate for those things?
So again, I mean, the development guidelines kind of provide some guidance around the densities and heights that could be achieved under the comprehensive plan land use designations. With a number of refinements given the historic context of these neighborhoods. So we welcome feedback on those, zoning guidance recommendations that are in the document. But, by achieving these densities under the comprehensive plan land use designations, we can achieve a greater number of set aside affordable units through those zoning regulations. So again, the document, and the Office of Planning is more land use regulatory in nature.
Great, thank you. John?
Yeah, Heba, the HPRB hearing on the 25th, is that a thing where you expect they're going to give you feedback? Is that a hearing where they're going to want testimony from other people, or is this just a report from you all to tell them where you are at this point?
So we are submitting it for consideration. We anticipate that we'll get some feedback from HPRB on those design guidelines. The community is welcome to sign up to testify or submit their testimonies ahead of time as well.
So it is a hearing with testimony as opposed to a report. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, correct. In the past, we've given informational sessions,
Right.
But this one, we have submitted the document for consideration at the hearing.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Bob?
Thanks. Heba, just to follow up on what John was talking about, the consideration by HPRB. I mean, this document was a product of both the Office of Planning, but also the Historic Preservation Office. Is that right?
That's correct.
So there, I think we talked about this on Saturday, but there's not going to be like an HPO staff report like you would see under a design consideration. This is the staff report. Is that right? That's correct. Yes. Okay. So one of my questions is regarding the Wardman property. It's in the study area. When this project kicked off, it was said that this was going to be part of the consideration. But in terms of the development guidelines, it doesn't really touch that property. It just talks about the two commercial zones down in Woodley Park, NC 4 and 5. And I know there's a project that's, well underway there, but doesn't it seem to make sense that we would, have some sort of recommendation on what should happen there based on what the council did in updating the FLUM for that property? Yeah, so a number of things. The Office of Planning has reached out to the developer multiple times early on in this process, and inviting them to participate in the process and kind of have conversations around what potential zoning changes could occur. However, they've expressed their intention to continue to move forward with a by right development, which they have. They've gotten HPRB support for their proposal, and they've already submitted a number of building permits. The Wardman site
prior to 2021 comp plan was designated as high density residential. And with the 2021 amendment, it got a low density commercial stripe. The design guidelines acknowledge that change and, points out that, it acknowledges that there is a development proposal and application that is ongoing right now. And that, however, if for whatever reason, this development proposal does not go through or gets amended, that the site could be looked at as an opportunity for, in addition to residential density, it could also be an opportunity to look at a number of commercial uses, such as a grocery store or daycare facilities, which have been certain uses, particular uses that have come up during this process. The site right now actually allows for more density than is being utilized under the current proposal. But like I said, the applicant did not express that they were not interested in looking at a rezoning application and just moving forward with a by right. So that's kind of the status. And in terms of design guidelines, the developer has worked with the HPRB, and they've gone through the HPRB process to go through these design considerations similar to those outlined in the document to achieve this notion of compatibility. So that's, in that sense, from a design guidelines perspective, they have gone through that process with HPRB as well. The design guidelines are intended to apply to both commercial areas, and they do acknowledge, they do point out that the Wardman is part of that.
Thanks. I have some other questions, but I'll let others have it go.
Thank you. Rick?
Thanks very much, Ms. El-Gawish. Appreciate your being here. I have just a couple of questions. You mentioned that this is supposed to be a blueprint, but some of the guidance, especially the preservation guidance, I think could be clearer. So first, you're recommending option C in both Cleveland Park and Woodley Park up to 75 feet in building height, and Cleveland Park are 7 stories, and I believe 90 feet or 9 stories in Woodley. Is that specified as a maximum building height, or can there be an extra habitable penthouse floor be built on top?
So the building heights do not include penthouses, whether for mechanical purposes or habitable.
Okay, and so how high could the penthouse structure be?
Those are regulated by the zoning code. I believe they're typically 12 to 15 feet in height.
Okay.
And they have to be set back at a certain amount.
So 7 stories could be 8 stories and 9 could be 10.
So it'd be 7 stories plus a penthouse.
Okay. And I'm going to refer to your study, and I'll give the page number because the participants may have that, but on page 22, which shows the cross section of Connecticut Avenue, and here in Cleveland Park, they note on the east side, there's what looks like a reasonable setback between the 75-foot plus building on the east side and Ordway Gardens. Are you recommending a rear setback there?
So the guidelines do recommend rear setbacks as well. I'm trying to get to that page if you would give me a moment.
Sure. And then on the west side, there's shown kind of a substantial green space, and I was kind of wondering where that is.
I have it in front of me if you want me to share screen, Heba or Commissioner Nash.
Okay, so you were referring to page 22 for the heights and then the setbacks.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what rear setback you're recommending between the taller east building and say Ordway Gardens there.
So on page 28, there's guidelines that speak to height transitions in general, and both along the front facades, typically along Connecticut Avenue, as well as the rear facades And it specifies that 1 to 2 building height step downs should be employed when they're facing established residences.
Okay, so how does that translate to setbacks? Or, you know, if it's not clear now, if you could let us know before the ANC meeting, that would be great. And then just one last question. On page 24, you say vertical additions to contributing buildings must preserve the underlying structure and prevent substantial demolition. But on several of the pages, such as 18 and 30 and 32, it shows you know, minimal setbacks from the front of contributing structures. So I was wondering kind of how this blueprint then is reconciled with the requirement to prevent substantial demolition.
Yeah, so I mean, the guidelines are supplemental to, you know, historic preservation regulations, one of which is this, you know, preventing substantial demolition. And, you know, that's both from a structural perspective as well as, you know, the step down, the step backs and setbacks are from a visual perspective as well, to kind of not overwhelm the underlying structure and the historic structure. So the setbacks kind of speak from a compatibility perspective, and then from a structural perspective, the way that they get developed and constructed, that they preserve the underlying structure.
Okay, I'll let others go with questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Tom?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here and for presenting this. I think this has been really informative and helpful. I know a few months back we had quite a bit of discussion here, but we'll be recalling the restaurant gap here in Cleveland Park and Woodley Park. I know that was sort of briefly mentioned here in the report, talking about reconsideration potentially of the NC3, NC4, and NC5 zones. Is there any further that you can speak to about that? I know there's a few of us here who would love to see some more ability for some of those restaurants and other types of food establishments to come in. I just wanted to see if you could say anything further on that. Thank you.
I think you're breaking up a little bit for me, but I think the question was around the restrictions on eating and drinking establishments in the NC zones.
Correct, the 25% cap on your street frontage.
Right. So through our engagement over the past year with you know, property owners, the main streets, as well as the community, we've heard about this restriction. You know, the intent behind it was to provide for a mix of retail and neighborhood services, right? And that this restriction over time has begun to kind of limit business growth and limit kind of the restaurant offerings along the corridor that the community would like to see and the property owners would like to you know, bring into their properties. So the guidelines do kind of explore that notion or recommend that those restrictions could potentially be lifted for those NC zones, NC3 in Cleveland Park and 4 and 5 in Woodley Park, to kind of advance neighborhood vitality in those two areas and business vitality.
Great, thank you. Do any other commissioners or committee members that have not asked a question yet have any before we open it up to community, and then we'll come back to? It's really just Tammy and Adam, I think, and myself.
I don't know. I'm pretty familiar with it. I think everyone's questions kind of answered where I was headed. So happy to move along.
Great, thank you. And I'd also like to thank my fellow committee members and commissioners for questions and not comments during this. And that's what we would like to keep this. We would like questions from the community at this time. And we're also going to set a 90-second time limit on asking said question. So with that, Jean and Mary Ellen, thank you for patiently waiting. If you can unmute and ask your question.
Yes, there are many things in this report that are commendable, but I worried about the details a little bit. On page 19, I'm trying to find the page. On page 19, there are objectives defined as use the redevelopment opportunities to restore, preserve, and enhance the neighborhood historic assets. And also, another one is harmony, design new buildings and building additions to highlight the neighborhood assets. My question is this going to be done by the Historic Preservation Review Board, or is it going to be done by somebody else? And if it's being done by the Historic Preservation Review Board, would that mean that everything that's built there would have to be pushed through whatever process they're using?
So development along the corridor would happen through private development. This is all privately owned properties. So private development, private property owners could come forward with development proposals that would go through the Historic Preservation Review Board process to evaluate the development proposal and the design of the building. You know, part of which, especially if it's additions to existing historic buildings, looking at opportunities for restoration of existing historic facades, and then, you know, design strategies to achieve compatibility between the proposed new development or addition with the existing kind of context.
The one thing that occurred to me was the last part of harmony talks about respecting existing neighborhood residences. Does the PRRB, I mean, the Historic Board have authority to do that, or would they have to get amended legislation to authorize them to take that into consideration?
I'm sorry, to take which part into consideration? So
the last part of harmony says,
oh, I see what you're
respect
saying.
existing neighborhood residences. And I'm just wondering whether the Historic Review Board has the authority to do that.
So they look at it from a design perspective and kind of the compatibility between new development and existing, you know, especially if they're adjacent to existing residences and existing homes, then looking at compatibility of design between the new development and existing residences.
And so have you spoken with the staff there? Are they happy with this approach?
So, yep.
Well, you can answer this question, but
That's the end of my question, but I just want to know
Yep.
that the board is already on board.
So we'll be speaking with the board on May 25th. The Office of Planning, the Historic Preservation Office division is within the Office of Planning, and we've been working with that division to put together those design guidelines.
Thank you very much.
thank you. Bonnie?
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna start video. Oh, thank you. I'm trying to start my video, but it's not working. Anyway, thank you, Ms. Elgoish, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I try to put this into questions. As I mentioned to you on Saturday, when the public hours or the office hours were changed at the last minute, I think that this document, I'm wondering about this document, the organization of it, and that it seems quite vague. And I was wondering if perhaps you could separate out the zoning, the historic preservation, and the historic issues, because I think that would be a more useful document. And I'm also wondering if you have any examples on your very lengthy report, all the examples of infill or adaptive use of, none of them are in historic districts. So the examples really don't apply here. And I think it's sort of what we're going to end up with is a cookie cutter approach with sort of glass and steel on top of, many stories of glass and steel on top of these small, facades, historic facades. And that leads me to the question of requiring greater setback. I know there's some talk about it, but if you just look at the page 30, you've got on the ground, you've got Cleveland Park Sam's Park and Shop. There's no setback there whatsoever. And other examples don't have any setback either. So I question whether these 7 to 9 stories on top of a historic small 1 or 2 story, it's just going to dwarf the building if there's flush with this facade, and it'll be kind of go to and back
So
to
Ms. Lepard, your 90 seconds are up, and those were a lot of questions. So we'll let Ms. Elgowish respond.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So we tried to include a lot of examples that, whether from historic districts. So we have examples from Capitol Hill. We've even used the library. It's more of a new construction from this historic district. We've also used examples along 14th Street where there was the preservation of existing historic facades, whether they're historic landmarks or historically designated buildings were preserved as part of a new development or addition. So those are examples along 14th Street. There are multiple of those. There's the example in Union Market where maybe it's not itself a historic district, but the building itself is historic and was preserved as part of kind of a new residential construction above the existing 1-story historic facade in at Union Market. So we did use a lot of examples that included the preservation of existing historic buildings, whether they're in historic districts themselves or the buildings themselves are designated. And in terms of setbacks, and the guidelines are intended to be taken as kind of in their totality and not just one thing solving for the entire notion of compatibility. So it's everything from height transitions, setbacks, building materials, building articulation, the design of the street wall itself. All of those together are intended to be taken to achieve compatibility and achieve this harmony with the existing historic fabric.
I'm not responding for Heba, but I just want to say, like, this diagram is probably what Ms. Lepard was talking about for the Sam's Park and Shop. There's a big parking lot in front of it, and so that's why that looks like that there's no setback, because there's a huge parking lot in front of it. So
Great, thank you. Anna Evans.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. I have a pretty simplistic question because I'm afraid I don't quite, I'm not as familiar with the language of development, but I gather that one of the reasons that you're proposing such an increased densities of building 7 to 9 stories is that we want to create more affordable housing. And I think in your chart, it said currently the FAR allows 10%, but with the increase, it could go 12 to 20%. So approximately how many units of affordable housing would you envision the new height, the allowed height of new construction would create?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it really depends on how much density a developer utilizes, and
it's assumed maximum density. Yeah.
Right. So we've modeled a number of what we called opportunity sites. We've modeled 5 sites along the corridor at those heights and densities that are listed in the document. Sorry, I'm looking for my document here, just to refer to it. So across the 5 sites that we've modeled, there is an opportunity to create up to 335 units, of which 65 would be set aside affordable. That's under the kind of the densities that are afforded through the comprehensive plan. Compared to current zoning, if we look at those same 5 sites, under current zoning, they could yield around 140 units, of which 14 would be set aside affordable. So those are kind of the 5 opportunity sites that we've modeled during this planning process.
So in other words, 65 instead of 14.
Right.
With all the construction that has been going on in Washington, all the new.
So Ms. Evans, we do
okay.
want to keep it to one question. We can circle back if we have more time.
Okay, thank you.
I also want to take a little bit of time here to cover the next steps in the process with the commissioners and members of the committee that are here this evening, and ask some questions about, like, do you want a resolution from, that's focused on Woodley Park, one that's focused on Cleveland Park, all in one resolution? And then also looking at my colleagues here, who's going to want to run point on this? But I'm assuming you probably want one resolution from both sides.
Right. So yes, the study area, it's one study area. They're looked at together. There are some guidance that differentiates Cleveland Park and Woodley Park, but again, it's one document and one study area. So one resolution could be helpful.
Great, thank you.
I'll answer your question, Commissioner Pagets, and then I guess I'll let Bob. I mean, I think I'm not going to put Tammy on the spot, but Commissioner Gordon and I might have to flip a coin or something. But
yeah, I know.
I'm happy. I mean, either way, I feel like both of us should be involved, and I'm happy to do kind of the hard work or whatever that's needed to kind of incorporate some of these. But it's both of our SMDs. So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll handle the bulk of the frontage of the zoo and the streetscape stuff, and then I'm hoping my friend
I guess
Adam.
I'll take Woodley Park since there's no other Woodley Park commissioner here.
Well, and I'll help you with that bit too.
No, it's not a problem.
I'm in the disputed territory. I mean, we're also looking for the help from our committee members that both reside in these respective.
Yeah, that's the great thing about the committees. We have other people to help. So
yeah. Bob.
Yeah, just real quick, in terms of implementation, you have how this plan can be, how these guidelines can be used. And obviously the development portion of them would result at some stage in rezoning, whether it's through a PUD or a rezoning, a direct rezoning process. Do you have plans to initiate a rezoning? I guess the reason I'm asking is we've had a number of these development projects over the last year since the comp plan has been approved, and we've seen the projects go matter of right. Anything and foregoing rezoning, anything that involved a process that they had to initiate, it seems like at least in Upper Northwest they've avoided it. I'm just curious, does the Office of Planning recognize that, and do they have any plans to initiate a rezoning?
Yes. So currently, what is being discussed is that following the completion of this process, that the Office of Planning would initiate either a text amendment or looking at the creation of a new zone, but would initiate a zoning change that is aligned with the future land use designations in the comprehensive plan, and also obviously informed by these design guidelines. So, the zoning, the rezoning process would be informed by those 2 documents.
And that process, just to clarify, would have its own then, right? Like input time and stuff like that would be its own thing. It's not like,
yes,
it's not like this and done. So, okay, just good to know.
Thank you. Rick.
Just one comment, picking up on something you just said, really the suggestion that you may be looking at the creation of a customized zone. I would urge you and urge my colleagues that if a customized zone is created, there is an opportunity here to, I think, be more aggressive on inclusionary zoning, going beyond IZ plus. I mean, after all, both of these are opportunity sites. They sit on top of Metro, and so they would presumably be attractive, for redevelopment. And as I said, and they're both in historic districts, so there is an opportunity to write a customized zone where the IZ requirements exceed what is currently an IZ plus, and I would hope that that is looked at.
Great. That can definitely be part of our discussion when we bounce things back and forth.
I like that idea too.
Okay, I do definitely want to save some time here for the service lane. So discussion, the future of that. So thank you for your presentation and everybody's questions. I felt great. And
Commissioner
then,
Faggots, can I make a quick comment on this?
yes.
Just a quick comment I want to say is 7 to 9 stories were thrown around, but we have to just remember it's 7 stories in Cleveland Park. And then there's a different height in Woodley Park. I'm just speaking to the Cleveland Park constituents. And a penthouse is not a story for a reason, because there's an immense setback, and the penthouse doesn't have to be just somewhere someone lives. Like my building has a penthouse, but it's not 6 stories tall. It's a place where there's a mechanical room. So that's still 5 stories. So I just want to stress that we're not going to 9 stories in Cleveland Park. That's not happening under any scenario under discussion here. So.
But it could be 8, and the building where you live was built before the zoning rules were changed to.
Right. It was before we went. Yeah.
Yeah, but
And again, 8. It can't be 8. It'll be 7 plus a penthouse. So it would still be 7 stories plus a penthouse. And I do want to stress that because it is different. It is not 8 stories. And the other thing I want to stress is that, I think Heba said this, but just want to re-stress that the Historic Preservation Office was part of this preparation of this document. And a lot of people have sent comments about like it's not accurate enough pertaining to that. Please do send those over to the ANC where you would like to see more accuracy. I think that would be good to include, to know where some of that extra accuracy can go. I mean, but again, this has been through HPO. All right, thank you, Commissioner Packett. Sorry to delay the service lane further.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. The other thing was we will post the slides to our website, and then hopefully we will also be able to get the links to, John, are you still here? The links to the WPCA and CPCA.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
It's our regular link, that you use when you show up. But I will put it in the chat.
Thank you, John. I'll add it to the website.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and we'll try and put those on our website too, so that folks have them, even though those are not being sponsored by the ANC, they're being put on by many organizations. But we usually lurk on them anyways. So, all right, thank you very much. With that, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the future of the Cleveland Park surface lane. So just of note, Tammy, I don't know if you have more information on when that bit's going to be done, but it's getting there.
Getting very close. Yeah, I think like all of the sidewalks to the sort of like right side of the street over by Nanny O'Brien's, all of the sidewalks in front of the businesses were drying and had paths over them into it. So it looks like the only thing that's really left is the left sides of the sidewalk. I haven't been out there today, so that could have happened today. But yeah, getting really close. I don't have an update on done, but I am in touch. And just for those of you who are anxiously awaiting that information, I'll let you know as soon as I can. I've also been approached by some neighbors who want to do, some sort of thank you for the construction workers who've been great and been really like swift and worked on that. So I've talked to Jam about that, and he's kind of like running it up the flagpole to see if that's doable, but we're looking at some kind of like maybe ribbon cutting and thank you situation.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So there's still the design that was completed in 2018 was always meant to have a shared space between car and pedestrian. However, with the service lane having been closed prior to construction even starting, and open to streeteries and wider sidewalk space during the pandemic, it seems like a lot of residents, and neighbors have really gotten used to, not dodging cars in that space, and have just, really enjoyed having that space for people, and not private car storage. So with that, this is up to the mayor's office and the city administrator and DDOT as to whether or not it's open for cars and parking, or if it's closed to cars and parking, and open for parking of people and movement of pedestrians through the space. Nanny O'Brien's, Atomic, and Bindis, and what am I missing? Started a petition on their own accord. That's been going on for about 3 weeks now. They transmitted approximately 800 signatures that they gathered online and in person over to us and to the mayor's office last week. They're still collecting signatures. That's not an insignificant number. The ANC has been collecting emails on this. I don't know if Swale has the latest tabulation on that, but do you?
I have a tabulation. I don't have the ones that came in yesterday, but I can bring up the latest tabulations. I think the ones that have come in yesterday and today, they've all been pros. Most of them have been pro, but yeah, so far, like if we only look at 3C residents, 83% want closed to cars permanently. 11% want some type of hybrid option where it's close to cars on weekdays till 5 p.m. and 6% want parking 24 hours. If we include 3C and non-3C residents, then 75% want close to cars permanently, 15% want a hybrid option, cars on weekdays until 5 p.m., and 11% want parking 24 hours.
Okay, thank you. And what was the total number of emails that you're running that off of?
75.
Yeah, it wasn't like 7. It was
No.
yeah.
So
and we really appreciate the input and thank everyone for the thoughtful commentary on this. So with that said, opening it up for any other comments or discussion on this before we wrap up here. Also, anyone can email us about any of these things at our all at ANC3C.org.
While Commissioner Pagets is typing that, there will be another opportunity for engagement on the service lane, which is May 10th. I'm not gonna say if there's gonna be a resolution or not there, but there will be another opportunity for engagement. So,
but there will definitely be a resolution available
on our 22nd meeting. Yes.
For discussion and vote at our May 22nd public meeting. We will have that resolution available when we notice the meeting at least 1 week prior to the meeting. So look for that if we don't have it out before then, which hopefully we will. We've really been trying to do our best to get resolutions posted, 10 days before our meetings, if not sooner. So we work really hard to do that. So I do definitely want to thank my colleagues for the time and effort that we get these things together in. So anybody, you can raise your hand, use your little raise hand feature there in the reactions button. Nothing? All right. If there is any, again, feel free to reach out to your commissioner, or Tammy and I to join this committee. Oh, Mara, you have your hand up just in time.
Hi, sorry, I tried to send you a chat and I think I sent it to the wrong person.
Oh, sorry, I just saw
I
it.
just wanted to ask a quick question in terms of the input that you've been getting. Does that get transmitted to the mayor's office and the others who are in a decision-making role on this? And is there anything that constituents can or should be doing to make their voices heard to the mayor's office or to DDOT or others aside from the ANC?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Yes, so when Patrick, the GM at Nanny O'Brien's, transmitted the petition information, it went to the city administrator, the mayor, Councilmember Fruman's office, and the director of DDOT, along with several folks from their staff. And also, since this is in Tammy's single member district, Tammy replied to that with what she's been hearing, especially in that hyper local area of her community and the businesses that she's talked to as well, and sent along the tally that we had at that point of the emails. I fully intend to write some summaries of what we've gotten in those emails as well. I should have mentioned the council member's office, and the council member is another one that, you know, folks should be reaching out to as well. But yes, we are running it up the flagpole, but any little bit helps to keep convincing folks, because yes, we've definitely, I mean, Tammy probably every time she goes outside gets comments.
Yes, every time I leave my condo, I get an earful. But I mean, that said, it's all been really great, and everybody seems like they've, you know, I think one of the big things, like, it's very rare in Cleveland Park at any ANC for like nobody to have a comment on something, and something that can be, you know, at least viewed as something controversial. So I think, to me, that means like we've already had several meetings on this where people have weighed in, people have emailed, they have emailed us, they have signed petitions, they have emailed the mayor's office. And so I think, like, to me, this is like a good place that we're kind of getting to where, you know, there's not as much you know, to say other than what has already been said by everybody. So I'm sure there'll be more ahead, but it's nice to see so much engagement on this.
I lost my hosting privileges, but I found the list of emails that people can email. If you all want, I'm happy to put them in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Commissioner
Sure.
Pagas.
I'll make you a co-host again.
Thank you.
The other thing to mention is a lot of the messages that we've been getting have been including, this positive experience with interacting with neighbors in the community, and how much more vibrancy that it has allowed for. So that's really positive, in my opinion. That's kind of what we hope to achieve with a lot of streetscape work.
Well, and I don't know that we'll make it, but I know we're like really trying to race towards being able to have the farmers market open. I don't know that we'll hit opening weekend, but it should be pretty close. So I think that's really exciting, because it's such a nicer space for that.
And if it's not on that side, it will be on the other side, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not canceling the farmers market. Good.
Oh gosh, no. That's like, are you kidding? That's like my passion.
All right. Well, we're right at 7:30. Yes. So if you want to join the committees, if you want to join this committee, if you have agenda items for any of this committees or any of the committees or this committee, please reach out. We're definitely, encouraging more engagement and participation in ideas.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and inputs.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for an efficient meeting. Bye.